gentlemen.
Yep. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the very first episode of Outside the Wire. Well, technically the first episode. We had a pilot episode a while ago, but this is the first proper episode where a couple of military enthusiasts talk about, well, military stuff. My name is Deathbringer, and this is Gun Monkey.
Hello. I'm Gun Monkey 1185, and don't ask me how I came up with that. It's a long story. Long story.
Yeah, very, very long story.
Get to that one day.
Yep, but for today's first episode, we are going to be taking a look or a deeper dive into the INSAS program, which is short for the Indian Small Arms System. So, I think the first thing we should probably do is give a little bit of a brief background as to what the INSAS actually is. And you say?
Yeah. INSAS is what it is. What the intended goal was to build a family of weapons, a suite of small arms for the Indian Army. Prior to introduction of INSAS by the Indian military, for the entire Indian by the introduction of INSAS into the Indian military, India had numerous weapon systems. They were using the British made, or I'm not sure it's British made, but it was imperial measure, imperial standard, F and FAL, or the SLR, is what the British referred it to as, but the official title is L1A1, Sterling SMG, and also the Bren gun in 762 Native. What in also numerous foreign acquired Kalashnikov pattern for, don't know why they went with the AK, but they have their reasons, and I'm not going to try to delve into it because we just don't have enough information.
And didn't they also, and didn't, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't they also have the Lee Enfields for a while?
Yeah, they actually produced the Enfield in 762 Native, mainly for second line as well as their paramilitary, like the Border Security Force, BSF or BS, basically their border security force. It's the Indian paramilitaries mainly handling the Indian uh, border security for India, with just about everybody, including Pakistan, Bangladesh, those to the north, I think it was China, obviously, and Nepal and Bhutan.
Yep. You might need to adjust your microphone volume a little bit. We just got a comment saying that it's a little hard to hear you.
Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you fine. It's the people in the chat.
Oh. Can anyone hear me? But is it better now or not?
Hang on. Let me see if I can do something on my end. A little better, still hard to hear. You might need to turn up your microphone volume a little bit on the PlayStation itself.
Mine is maxed out. You know what? Give me a sec. Let me see what I can do here.
Yeah. This is all being done live, so there's bound to be some technical difficulties for the first episode. But it's okay, we can fix things in post.
Okay, alrighty then. Is it better now, gang? Let me check here. Okay. Everything looks normal. Anyone else?
Anything? Is it good? Let's see what they say.
Good, bad, or ugly? Sorry. And no, I'm not Canadian.
Let me see if how it sounds on my end.
Hmm. Yeah, my thing on my volume maxed out.
Okay, well we can go from there and see if that see how that works. So why don't you continue?
So, anyway, so what ended up happening, and with INSAS, that INSAS were basically a replacement for a number of to basically, yeah, it was a replacement for a number of small arm um, for the Indian military, Army, Navy, as well as the Air Force. Uh, and it was an ambitious program because there's really the time they were working on it. India, it was the first time ever that India actually came up from the ground up, had a specific. I'm not sure if anyone know what these terms are, but I'll just give you a quick rundown. India had to come up with their own technical data package. Technical data package is literally a master. It's a document that covered how how certain system to be how to be built, material specification. Um, it's very complicated. The technical data package is like basically a master recipe of sort for building material, building it like a finished product, like an automobile. Um, Small arm technical data package is significant because without technical data package, um, you really kind of have to reverse engineer what the Chinese have done with a lot of their weapons, especially the small arm, when they had a falling out with Russia. So just kind of give you an idea what that is. Now, in the case of the INSAS, what India did was they basically took a Kalashnikov and kind of give it its own spin. It's not 100% clone. It's more like somewhere in the neighborhood of 50, 60%, and certain function on it is kind of coming off of the set me and the G3 family with that whole entire interesting cocking, how they cock. The weapons are cycle, that pull up, the charging handle pull back and release forward, that kind of thing. If you know anything about small arm, especially rifle, India did a pretty decent job, but there were few things that they kind of fall short on.
Right. And what would
Significantly,
remind me? When was this? When did they actually introduce the INSAS into service? And like when did they start
if I
production?
remember correct, um, don't quote me. Let me check real quick, but I'm pretty sure it was sometime they were looking to do the replacement all the way back in the 80s. Give me a give me a second. Should have pulled this up. Should have had this available. But okay, according to Wikipedia, it was produced from 1994. So okay, so it started sometime in 1980s. Um, it was designed from 1980 to 1997. So it took them a while.
Oh,
Not
1997. That's when I
surprisingly.
was born.
Interesting. Um, and they start production in 1994, and it's still technically still in production. However, and Okay, so yep, like I said earlier, INSAS is primarily based on AKM, which is a stamp steel um, very version of an AK. AK, you got the AK original AK-74. I'm sorry, AK-47, which were machined from actual piece of steel, one block, and they just machine and into a shape and then go from there. AKM was the first successful um, mass-produced stamped steel AK variant by Soviet Union, and then it came later AK-74. It does have some design feature of the F and FAL, um, the gas regulator, the charging handle. It's similar to H&K 33, so that's where the whole charging. That's kind of interesting about the INSAS. It had a charging handle similar to ZBB as well as the G3. Let's see what else it has here. Fire from semi-auto, 3-round burst, and full auto. Rate of fire is quite low, is 650. So now it does have both 20 and 30 round magazine, uh, which is similar to Fire Og, and just and that's the interesting part. That's one thing about that particular um, about incest because that's one of the major problem it has with the incest because well let's get started on it because since we are on the whole thing with the magazine what ended up happening is that when the Indian military was operating in the Himalayan mountain range where of a higher altitude closer to the sun, the polymer they used at that time was not really by today's standard really low quality. So that's why they numerous issue with magazine. And if you know anything about military small arm is built like as a system. You have components that are going to go with it that will allow it to work or not work. And if you had magazine, you're going to have a very bad time, especially when you get into a fight. Because magazine failed to hold up in the environment it needs to be operating in, there's your problem.
Yeah, when you have those kinds of conditions, you really need to have something that's actually built to last.
Right, exactly. And back then, polymer technology somewhat of a it. I would call it the toward the tail end of infancy because that was like kind of like a first one of the first generation of the polymer magazine. And most military that used polymer magazine that time their small arm, mainly to start off back then in the INSAS.
Yeah.
And I don't recall there anybody else that used it. Well, I'm sorry, any other small arm that used polymer magazine other than the Glock by that time. But Indian military, I don't even think they even entertained Glock at all. But they may in the present.
Based on all the research
But
that I've done regarding regarding that, it doesn't look like they've actually entertained the idea of using the Glock.
oh, that's unfortunate.
I
Sure.
think they want to try and actually develop their own semi-auto pistol. But that's a discussion
Oh
for an
boy.
entirely different day.
Oh, yeah. Let's not let's that. Actually, that should be a episode that is on about India and their industrial capacity.
Yeah, we shall be
When it
focusing
comes
on
to
that one on a different day.
exactly, but this is going to be a repeat because this discussion, the next discussion, and the next discussion will touch on all of that. So it's going to build up toward that conversation it definitely in the future. This is going to be a interesting fodder. God, I love the Indian. They give us something to talk about.
Yeah.
Oh man, talking about the gift to keep giving.
Yeah, basically.
Hey ho. Any. So that is one problem that Indian military has, and because India being the the major they're the regional power in South Asia, so they supply they provide aid to both. Trying to remember here, there's at least two countries I can think of my head, Nepal as well as Bhutan. And yes, Bhutan does have military. They just don't really advertise about it. The Bhutanese really rely heavily on Indian to um, to be their muscle more or less because they kind of don't want to go into building a military, so to speak. They had no desire, or let's say strong desire
They're not particularly
to.
interested at this point in time.
No, no, they're not. It's not a thing for Bhutan. Nepal, on the other hand, does. And the reason why they do because they want to have some level of viability. However, Nepal don't have their industrial capacity to produce small arms, so they'll get whatever they can get their hands on, wherever that source come from. But the Nepalese military really prefer Western weapons, just because they kind of have a thing for Western technology.
Yeah.
So I'll leave it at that. But when the Nepalese got their hands on the INSAS, they were not keen on it. They found out real quickly that INSAS was not fit for role.
And why was that, actually?
Same problem that Indian Army had.
Ah.
It's just that the Nepalese are a little more vocal about it.
Right.
They learned very quickly that INSAS was not. It was a gift that they kind of accepted it, but it wasn't something that um, they would want to be using it in the regular or use it as their main weapon. I mean, when they got the M4 from US, they just freaking they were happy as clam. Let's put it.
I was going to say, they fell in love with that, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, when the Nepalese army got the M4, they were like, ooh, American weapon. Well, Nepal, home of the Gurkhas. The, the Gurkhas served both in the British and the Indian Army, as well as they do have their own Gurkha within the Nepalese army is part of their military history and structure. And M16 were what do you call it, a supplemental weapon for the Hong Kong garrison up until the time the L85 became standard issue, and then M16 were kind of they were slowly being pulled out, but they left it in Hong Kong with the Gurkhas while they were stationed in Hong Kong. But once they left Hong Kong, when the British left Hong Kong, they they brought all the M16 slash Armalite to UK. But anyway, back on the INSAS. Um, the INSAS really, um, the Indian kept it mainly because it's their own design. They can manufacture. if you want to be known for a to have a viable military, you want to have your own production of the
Hmm.
weapon for your military.
You want to be able to produce
The
things
problem,
domestically with some form of reliability.
exactly, and the problem is that because of the polymer, and polymer going to the hand, polymer was actually in the handguard, polymer was in the stock, the polymer was all there's and the magazine, the magazine polymer being clear. The problem with clear polymer is that it's in order to make a clear polymer magazine, you use a different type of polymer, and with that, it's not as strong, and the composition of that polymer, the chemical composition, are different from say non-clear polymer. Because at that time there were polymer magazine available, but were they reliable? Not really. The Israeli tried it. The Canadian tried it. When the Canadian went with the C7, C8, it didn't hold up as well. So what the Canadian do? They went to aluminum magazine that U.S. was using, because at that time that was about the same time that NATO's STANAG became a thing, and the
Yeah.
STANAG magazine, which is the M6, magazine for all 5.56, were basically patterned on a U.S. M16 original M16 magazine.
Yeah. And it was basically a case of go with what you know sort of thing.
Exactly. Have some form of uniformity, even if you're not using the same weapon, exact same weapon. Now, the problem with it, with another problem with India is that um, over time the weapon just have have a lot of um, reliability problem. It go
Uh,
back to metallurgy.
goes back
If
to
you
metallurgy.
produce, and the problem with any weapon, especially if they're made out of metal, metallurgy is extremely important. AR-15, um, the reason why some people say that it has some issue is the the problem is already resolved from the day one. It's called uh, the injection port cover. When Eugene Stoner developed the first AR-15, going with that particular, just looking at that, you see that little trapdoor thing that opened up, and you see sometimes U.S. military personnel close it. Part of it, when they um, do weapon manipulation, they're taught to close it. And I was taught that when I was in U.S. Army. It was taught at my basic training, even at range, where like, hey, close that thing. If it's not shooting, you close it, because it's literally one place that could potentially allow dust, dirt, the thing to ingest into the internal of the weapon and just drill into my head into to this day. I mean, I do own an AR-15, and I still catch myself doing it. I cannot stop doing it. It literally drill into my head. Close it, close it, close it. Why?
To stop
Because
it.
that is really one place where anything that can be ingested from the outside could come in.
Yes, to stop debris
Easy.
from getting in.
Exactly. Now the thing with the INSAS, I don't know precisely what some of the problems are because they never really done really thorough investigation about it. But I'm thinking is that the main reason why it's not reliable is because of the used to build the receiver.
Right.
Over time, when they get used, and used, it need to be um, it need to be tested every so often. The reason why AKs are so quote unquote reliable could operate when it's needed because it's severely overgassed. Overgassed, it got more gas pushing the bolt carrier back with enough energy to keep it going, and by doing that, they have to have a level tolerant allow it to keep moving inside, even when there is some dirt, mud, whatever, get ingested into it.
And
And there is
as we all know, the Kalashnikov has very loose tolerances.
yes, it is definitely loose on the loose side. I don't know precisely because I never handled it, so I don't know how loose it is. I've seen U.S. military personnel that went over to India on a training exercise with the Indian Army. I don't know if these are they swapped if they I don't know precisely what they did, but it seemed to work. When
Yeah.
supposedly, there have been a time where the Indian military having problem with it. Now, if possible, it might be due to the improper lubricant
Hmm.
because some lubricant are not all lubricant have this, especially for a weapon to be used. Like example, the well-known lubricant the U.S. military use, CLP. Um, CLP is designed for mainly for M16 and M9 pistol when it was developed. It was introduced. I'm sorry, when it was developed and introduced to U.S. military, mainly because that's what we had in basic training. I mean, I had that in when I was in basic training and my time in the Army Reserve. We we had we didn't have M9 pistol. The unit I was in anyway. We were still issued with a 45 ACP, and I can tell you those things. There's some of those 45 probably been around since World War II. Who knows? I don't. We don't know. But when I picked my 1911 pistol that I picked up, I shaked it. The slide, I can hear the clanking.
Oh
I
God,
can
that is
hear the barrel
bad.
clanking. Yeah, exactly. Well, I can definitely hear the barrel. The slide was little slightly loose.
I really wouldn't want to try fire that thing. I feel like it would
We
just
had the
break apart in
crossfire.
my. I feel like it could just break apart in my hands if I shot it.
Oh no 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 no! It wasn't breaking apart. No, we had one that would not go back in battery.
Oh God.
Yeah, the one I had was we were lucky that it went in battery all but once. But we had some that was literally did that every other round would not go in battery.
Jesus Christ.
So in regard to the incest, I don't know if they use the proper lubricant or they
But
had the proper lubricant for
for what they
what
have.
they what they have. Because not because even the richest military in the world always use the proper lubricant.
Because you go with what works.
Exactly. I can tell you this: when one of the well-known AK bespoken AK builders here in the U.S., when he actually ran his own, well, his first company was I forgot the gentleman's name, top of my head, but he ran he actually founded Rifle Dynamic.
Mm.
His personal uh, choice of lubricant he used is lithium grease on his personal AK that he built for himself.
Ah.
He used grease. He didn't. It basically it's a type of grease on the border, similar to automotive grease
Right,
on his
okay.
AK. Okay, so I don't know if the Indian military used grease, oil, or whatever. I don't know. Not gonna say if they use or not. I don't know. If the big question mark that really I don't have an answer for it, and I'm pretty sure Deathbringer does not
No.
either.
That was
So we're
something
not
I
going to
did try
presume
to
anything.
that was something I did try to look into and I couldn't find much information about that.
So we're not going to speculate. We're just going to say we don't know. So you're going to have to ask someone in the Indian military to kind of fill in the blank for us because we don't know.
If we find more information, we can always update the next episode with the information, with like any updated information that we find.
So it would be appreciated if you know anything about that. Just fill in the blank for us, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. Now,
Um,
what? Correct me if I'm wrong. What caliber? Oh, sorry, not correct me if I'm wrong, but enlighten me. What caliber is it that the INSAS is chambered in, or is it chambered in multiple calibers?
no, it's only chamber in one, which is 5.56. It's the first 5.56 used by the Indian military.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Now the Indian military does some of their unit does use IWI Tabor. They do have some of them do some unit in the Indian Army does have uh, get issue M4.
Hmm.
Don't know is it M4 or M4A1. Don't know. I'm not going to speculate. But I've seen them use them, and um, because of the ongoing reliability issue that constantly keep cropping up with the INSAS, the Indian Army actually did a couple things.
What was it they did?
Um, it's quite interesting because when I saw so they purchased commercially off the shelf SIG USA 716, which is in 762 NATO. They specify full auto on it because they want to have a 762 NATO rifle that are modern. Now, I saw a YouTube video of a sergeant and a corporal. Now, let me go ahead and just put a little bit of a caveat on it. The 6716, it's actually produced mainly initially at the civilian 762 NATO rifle for civilian market here in U.S. It is also made available as a commercially off the shelf for military to purchase. It is one of the lightest 762 AR-10 pattern rifle in current production. this sergeant and corporal, okay, they decided to put it in full auto and decided to shoot it from a kneeling position.
Okay. But that went down well.
Well, I don't know it was a sergeant or corporal, but the shooter kneeling position didn't sit in a brace kneeling position, meaning that he actually was somewhat relaxed. And what transpired was he went from kneeling position to sitting down on his tush. When I saw that video for the first time, I ended up have to rewatch it total of I think 3 or 4 times to trying to figure out what went wrong. And then by the time I watch it for the third time, I realized that oh my god, these two were trying to shoot the lightest producing AR-10 variant in full auto. Yeah, that didn't go. That's why they end up on their tush. Because if you want to fire full auto from a rifle that are designed to fire full uh, quote unquote battle rifle caliber, yeah, and now Indian military usually don't have some of the biggest guy in the world.
No, they're
That's
generally
pretty obvious.
pretty short and not very
Well,
stocky.
they're kind of on the skin, and they're on the very skinny, very trim, which means they don't have a lot of weight to kind of like they're tall. They're tall, sufficiently tall, but they don't have to wait, and so they got pushed back.
I'm not surprised with a weapon firing a full caliber round. You get thrown on your ass.
And he did. And they and some I I think I recall one of them was like they I'm not entirely I don't recall, but I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus, but you don't you don't want to be shooting a 7.62 NATO in full auto with a rifle that light.
No, you'd be better off firing semi-auto or burst.
Right. Because it is designed to be fired in semi-auto.
Well, it's like I remember watching a thing the other day where they were talking about the British-made version of the SLR.
Mm-hmm.
They actually had it mechanically locked, so you couldn't fire it full auto.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They yeah the British Army learned very quickly that in 7.62 NATO, when you fire full auto, your first round might hit your target. The second one may or may not hit your target, but your third round started becoming an anti-aircraft gun,
Yeah.
and the fourth round definitely it's anti-aircraft gun and then.
Yeah. You might as well be using it to shoot down aircraft at that stage because you're going to be nowhere near on target.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Um,
even all the imperial pattern FAL used by the British, the Australian, New Zealand, Canada. Actually, take that back. The Canadian had their own pattern. They were the first country actually adopted FAL from the Commonwealth,
Yes.
and they actually developed their own. They had their own. Um, they had an LMG version of the called the C2, the C1 with the original semi-auto only FAL in imperial measurement. Um, the South African, because they got the metric because of the apartheid and blah 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 blah.
Yeah,
Long story short.
that is again another subject for another day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So with because from what I understand with the INSAS, it was there was an LMG version planned, wasn't there?
Yes, they do have them.
Yeah. Because I've seen pictures of the INSAS LMG model, like LMG version. I've seen photos of it. It's a funky looking thing.
Basically, it's kind of like it RPK, kind of what the what the RPK is to the AK.
Yeah.
Because the standard issue magazine for INSAS as a rifle is 20 round. The LMG was supposed to get a 30 round magazine.
Right.
Actually, if you look at the magazine for INSAS, it truly was inspired by the AUG mags.
Yeah, I did notice parallels there.
Mm-hmm. Quite interesting. Anyhow, so that's the and I think they went with a slightly thicker barrel.
Now,
Now I don't know how.
for the people who might not be entirely in the know about that, what would a thicker barrel actually do to a rifle?
It provides it provides much for barrel, allow it to fire in full auto.
Would it provide more stability?
To a degree, yes.
Okay.
It really boiled down to how the barrel were built.
Right. Okay.
You have the coal hammer forged. Most country in the world military barrel for their rifle are coal hammer forged. The thing with coal hammer forged is that the original when it was first developed, excuse me, it wasn't as accurate as like say the button rifle barrel.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, the button rifle barrel is much more complicated to produce, but it's also built more for accuracy, and that's a thing here in the U.S. that is in the United States that they're really big on.
Is the button rifle barrel?
Yeah.
Okay.
The coal hammer forged barrel is much denser, molecularly, structurally denser. However, it also, but you're compromising accuracy.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why a lot of the one of the first generation NATO 5.56 rifle were not as accurate as say like the M16.
Right. Okay.
it takes some time to get the coal hammer forged barrel to get as accurate as the button rifle barrel.
Hmm.
Yeah, the first rifle that was actually produced with coal hammer forged barrel for U.S. military was the M16A4,
Okay.
and because the A4 were produced by the FN USA, and FN know how to produce coal hammer forge because that's all they ever done.
Right.
Yeah, it lasts longer. It holds up. It holds up. You can fire more round through it, but it's not as accurate as say button rifle barrel.
No.
So when you hear us American talking about like they want like a accurate barrel, the standard is 1 inch, 1 MOA, 1 minute of angle, equivalent of say 1 inch at 100 meter.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's where the standard come from. Most European military barrel, like say some of the early 416, the C7, C8, they're not 1 MOA barrel. And
No.
U.S.
Okay.
military barrel is not even 1 MOA. It's the commercial rifle from company like say Bushmaster. I'm trying to remember. There's a few other companies that out there that produce really high quality. Well, let me rephrase that. Um, highly accurate barrel. So you ever hear a company like say Ballistic Advantage, a few other companies that make really, really accurate barrel for AR-15 for commercial use.
Hmm.
Anyway, back to the INSAS. What have could have been done with INSAS project?
Yes, I suppose that's $1 million question here. Actually, what could have been done with it?
Well, the problem is at that time when the INSAS was in development, India were doing all the development in house.
Mm.
They didn't really have the full understanding how to produce. I'm not entirely sure if they did or not, but I'm gonna guess that they probably did not. I could be wrong, but they didn't have a full knowledge on how to really produce high-end weapon. I'm sorry, that of that ambitious project. But and the reason why is that a lot of countries they want to be able to say, hey, we did everything ourselves. It's a matter of national pride, and it's a selling point to any other future product that India might to get into. And this right there, this very logic, it's a problem that's not just INSAS, but Arjun and Tejas program
Yes, and those we will definitely be covering in the next couple episodes.
in that particular order.
Yep. The Arjun is definitely going to be something that I'm a little bit more well versed in, because when it comes to tank stuff, that's more my speed, as well as aircraft.
And right, so I'll be doing what Death does in this episode because that's his jam, and I'll be the one who just Like, what happened? Explain. For those in the know now, I'm I will be go ahead and kind of bring up this particular company.
Oh, yes.
This is an example of what a country done intelligently when it comes to small arms. If anyone know what the if you do, if most people would never hear this company, but this company is based out of UAE.
For those who don't know, the UAE is the United Arab Emirates.
Precisely. And this company is called Caracal. Now, Caracal did something quite interesting. They brought an expert that know how to produce firearm, specifically rifle and pistol, because the gentleman they brought in for their rifle project, okay, is one of the engineers that worked on the project called the H&K 416 for heckling cokes.
Yeah.
Besides that, he's also worked on for 6 hour to produce their own Armalite clone.
Ooh, some big names there, actually. Damn.
Yeah. They didn't play around. Okay, they brought him in and basically had him as director and the chief project manager. So much so that the gentleman that actually the Caracal own AR-15 is on verge of by a very well known um, gentleman by the name of Chris Bartoshi. So if you don't know who that gentleman is, you might know the couple book he wrote called Black Rifle and Black Rifle 2.
I thought the name
If you have
sounded
a chance,
familiar.
Chris Bartoshi went and check out the production himself. UAE. He at this rival Colt in the height when they were producing 16 and M4 for U.S. government. In certain respect, they wouldn't exceed that standard set by Colt.
Mm-hmm.
The weapon that it was so well built that it now the intention for UAE to develop Caracal was to basically fulfill a niche were specific for Middle East. They want to be the main source of provider of small arm, mainly personal weapon and personal sidearm for military in the Middle East, the entire Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, UAE, Oman, Spain, anybody else and anybody else would be interested. They do an excellent job with it because they brought somebody with the know-how to produce high quality weapon that would rival Western company that produce a weapon at a much more affordable price.
Yeah. And if you can do that, you've already set yourself up for success.
Precisely. So that is an example of what you could do if you know your limitation.
If you know your limitations and you know how to overcome them.
Mm-hmm. Because the thing is, when it comes to small arm technology, um, a lot of technology is not restricted. And the reason I say that because unlike, say, tank, production of tank and production of combat jet, um, you don't have to worry about basically with licensing as much as you would have with those versus, say, small arm.
Yeah. And if you don't have to worry about the licensing issues, you can actually be you can afford to be a little bit more experimental.
Right. And that's where the problem and that's the problem I see with what's going on with INSAS project.
Now, just very quickly, just to maybe at things off, how would you fix it? If you were actually in charge of the development of the program, how would you fix the problems?
First and foremost, if you're going to do small arm, you pretty much already know that you don't have any restriction, except maybe initial cost of basically doing a development cost. That is where the problem started with INSAS. Because back in the day when INSAS was original program was started, um, most of firearm technology would rest in very few countries, multiple in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because if you look at the Indian history when it comes to small arm, most of their small arm up until INSAS program were basically okay. In case of the FAL, they I'm not entirely sure if India got the I don't know if for sure if they have TDP for the FAL from Britain, or they just reverse engineer it because they did the same thing with the L118, L119 light gun, and that's a that's a bit of a mess there.
Yeah. I've heard some of the horror stories.
Yeah, it was a bit of a mess there, so I don't know because because at one point, sorry, my end.
That's all good.
Um, the problem with INSAS is that instead of trying to fix the problem, India just basically thrown. It sounds like they're throwing somebody under the bus.
Yeah.
They blame the end user instead of like, hey, yeah, we know it. It's like, okay, we can fix it, or we'll try to fix it. They didn't come up with a fix, especially the magazine. Because when you have like a military weapon that rely on high capacity magazine, or yeah, military with a 20 round magazine, and your magazine it's falling apart, you're gonna have a problem. You need to figure out. You need to have you need to have a backup plan.
Yeah.
And if you don't, then you need to come up with some kind of immediate solution. Now, what they could have is went and basically develop a steel magazine instead of the plastic and go from there. Because at that time, some of the Kalashnikov has they're in 5.56. India could have acquired some magazine from Israel or any other, for the Galil. I know the Chinese were producing AK in 5.56, and some of the Eastern European country that had license to produce AK. Some of them did produce them in 5.56.
Ah, okay.
Even Finland had a 5.56 in one of their AK pattern. Because at
Ah.
that time, Finland was still using. They had an AK type weapon, but in 7.62 by 39. But they actually did develop some in 5.56 that were for predominantly export market in limited number. So India could have gone that direction. That would have been easy, easiest way to basically look at how to issue with the magazine. Number one, number two, overall reliability. Likely it could have been the lubricant they'd use.
Mhm.
They may have been using regular motor oil. And yes, that actually is a thing. I've heard of story of 4 Legionnaire were told to use motor oil as a lubricant on their service weapon.
Oh dear God.
And I don't know which weapon it was. I'm pretty sure it wasn't the FAMAS. I think it was precursor to FAMAS. I think it was a MAS 49 that they had lubricant. They were using motor oil on, or even grease. Just got to go easy on the grease. Just take a little bit, dab it on the rail, put the bolt back in, close it up, and then on the outside just paint it with a thin coat of motor oil. Boom, done. You can do it. But that's a possibility, or another thing, what they could have done was actually like, hey, we need to kind of put this on hold, take the whole weapon back out of the, from the front line, identify the problem they're having, fix it,
And then reissue it.
and they reissue it. But the magazine was the initial problem. So was the handguard. Handguard, the polymer was cracking.
Mm.
Okay, so if polymer cracking, which means that it was not, it was, it was too, it would have considered be fragile. What they done with a handguard was actually use a wooden one with a metal insert. Just put the metal inside, drill a hole through it so you have a ventilation for the barrel, so the air can get into the barrel, cool the barrel down, and do the same the upper part because they have the lower and upper.
Yeah.
But that was they didn't do that.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, because the Russian, when they introduced uh, the AK-74, their their polymer was somewhat experimental. It had carbon fiber introduced to it. I'm thinking that the Indian military either put enough or didn't put any at all to provide strength, prevent it from cracking.
Mm.
And that is one of the things that they didn't get around to it. So that could have been a problem could have been fixed. Two problems. Introduce a metal magazine, preferably steel, because steel will hold up. However, it's a lot heavier than polymer, because polymer is very light. Very light.
Yeah.
I mean, even now, a lot of countries that use AR pattern rifle, like some of the country in Europe, a lot of country in Europe, um, use Magpul magazine. Actually, U.S. Marine Corps standard magazine issue is polymer by a company called from Magpul,
Right.
and the U.S. Army is an optional item by your unit if they choose to or not. I know a lot of the Northern European countries are using polymer. The French, I think they're going to stick with steel magazine. That's what I saw on their weapon.
And the Indians could do the same thing.
Well, currently right now the Indian don't really have they don't have a standardized weapon across the board. Some unit Indian Army use the Tavor. Okay, that's what their supposed standard weapon is at. But they also have option to take out AK pattern rifle if they need to kind of punch something a little bit harder to punch through.
Right.
Because a lot of NATO countries don't use the same ammunition.
No.
So the French for longest time, when they were using the FAMAS, in the example, the French were using steel case ammo, because the FAMAS problem with FAMAS is the issue with the ejection. They need something a little bit stronger to hold up on the ejection.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the reason why there's a vary in terms of like ammunition use. Like in case of New Zealand, New Zealand won the most expensive route possible.
Yeah, they did.
You in New Zealand decided to go ahead and use like literally like a high performing round. I mean, we're talking about like a round that costs like over $1 a shot here in the state. Yes, those are New Zealand use 77 grain OTM produced by Black Hill, and those guys are the one who developed it for long range shooting.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, long range accuracy. Let me rephrase that. Well, everybody else using 88 grain. I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry, not 88 grain. 62 grain M855 that would develop to satisfy the Norwegian desire to not have tumbling ammunition. So, yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to throw Norway under the bus, but sorry. Didn't mean to, but
That's fine.
so anything else you may have asked? Any question?
Yeah, have we got any questions in the chat before we wrap this up?
Please don't be afraid to ask us.
We'll give it a couple minutes and see if there's any questions. Let's have a look. Oh, we've actually done a good time. It doesn't look like we're having any questions at the moment, so I think it might be good to wrap it up here. Apologies for the technical difficulties in the beginning, folks. Hopefully we have them ironed out for the next one. This is very much an experimental thing to start with. But yeah, we hope you enjoyed the first episode. And take care, folks, and we shall see you all next time. Alright, this has been Deathbringer and Gun Monkey, signing off.
Salute. Ciao.